Good afternoon, everyone. It is a great honor and pleasure to receive this afternoon at the CPR for our 88th workshop of the series Urban Workshop Banashri Banerjee for a presentation entitled Democratization through Participatory Action Planning in Yangon. I will start with a short introduction on Banashri Banerjee. She is a urban planner working as an independent consultant and also as an associate staff member of the Institute for Housing and Urban Development Studies in Rotterdam. In her career spanning more than 3 decades, the focus of her work has been on inclusive approaches to urban planning and management, particularly related to the poor. Her other interest is urban land management, in which she has considerable experience related to practice, research, and teaching. Banashri has worked as a consultant on urban planning and poverty reduction projects supported by bilaterals and international agencies in India, Egypt, Korea, Myanmar, Philippines, and Bangladesh. She has undertaken prestigious international assignments such as panelist at the World Urban Forum in 2010, chairperson in the international jury for the UN Habitat Best Practices Award, and working group member of the Global Commission for Legal Empowerment of the Poor. Thank you so much, Banashri, to be here. So we will start with a 45-minute presentation approximately, and then it will be followed by a series of questions.
Thank you very much, Christine, and namaskar to everyone here. For me, it's a bit of a strange topic, democratization through participatory action planning, but I picked up the current language in Myanmar, where there's a lot of talk on democratization using different instruments and approaches. And this is one of those things. I've been working in Myanmar since 2013, and in the last 4 years we've seen a tremendous amount of change. There's a fast tracking of development in every direction, and very, very rapid development in the country. In Yangon there were hardly any cars. You could see some of these, nano and Indica taxis around in 2013, but now you have the roads are absolutely choked with vehicles. So I don't know whether that's progressive or regressive. But in this presentation, what I'm going to do is to first build the context by introducing Myanmar and the reform process it's going through, and look at Yangon city and its townships. In Myanmar, all habitations, human settlements are called townships. You can have rural townships or you can have urban townships. And Yangon has 33 of these townships, which are again then divided into wards. Then I'll look a little bit at the opportunities and challenges for participatory action planning in these townships, and then discuss the methodology that we followed in practice. And then finally I'll present an example of township action plan, which has been prepared by township stakeholders and presented in front of the mayor and the regional chief minister of Yangon. Now, if we introduce Myanmar and the recent changes, what you see is that this is the country of Myanmar, and it is the administrative structure is that there is a union government, and there are state and regional governments. There are 7 states and 7 regions. Now, the states are kind of semi-autonomous states. And there is, what you would see is the regions are more or less where the British were. You have right from here along the Irrawaddy River, these are the states, and then around you have the states which are kind of semi-independent. Some of them have their own armies. And the whole thing together makes up the Union of Myanmar, and there have been many kind of struggles of these regional bodies. The capital city, Naypyidaw, is rather new. It was inhabited from 2006, and the prime cities are Yangon, which is near here, the Irrawaddy Delta, and then you have Mandalay, which is the second largest city here. Now, there's been a lot. There are a number of interlinked factors which stimulate the growth of cities in Myanmar. First of all, in the last decade, there've been, reforms. So one is the changeover from 5 decades of military rule to a system of democratic governance, and this has gradually taken place with the new constitution in 2008. Then in 2011, we had decentralized regional and state governments. The state and region Lutos came in, which is the assemblies. And then, of course, in 2016, we have Aung San Suu Kyi's NLD, National League for Democracy, which came into power and took office in 2016. And parallel to this has been a transition from a centrally planned economy to a market-based economy, which has invited FDI and also, encouraged a lot of private sector. And there's been a huge growth of industries, and particularly garment industries, and also metalworking and a whole lot of things like that. And these are located mostly around Yangon in the townships and some in Mandalay. And along with this is development of a huge amount of infrastructure, highways, then bridges and things like that. And the money is coming from the Chinese, the Koreans, the Japanese, and as well as from Singapore mostly. And the third part is that, there's been an attempt after 60 years of conflict, and our friend from Myanmar, he knows about it, he's from Chin State, where the states have been fighting for some amount of autonomy and things like that. So this whole state of flux of the country as such, it seems to be ending with representation. Now the vice president is from Chin State, so these kind of things are getting looked at as well. Then, so all these aspects are leading to the growth of cities. You have the change in military rule, from change to a democratic system. Then especially the opening up of the economy has led to development of cities. And then, of course, we have the NLD's commitment to developing cities, which is the first time in Myanmar history that anybody is talking about urban and cities, because it is agriculture dominated and, of course, minerals. So it's the primary sector which has precedence in Myanmar. So for the first time, somebody talked about cities, somebody's talked about the poor in cities, somebody's talked about migrants in cities. Yeah. And then you have, parallel to this also, there's been a lot of natural disasters which have resulted in migration to cities. You have Cyclone Nargis in 2008, which led in some sense to opening of the country to aid from NGOs and international organization. Then there's also been prolonged drought in the central areas of Myanmar, which has led people to go into the cities. And then, of course, you have all the industries developing, and then all informal jobs which have absorbed people there. So there is a commitment towards democracy, development, and a better future for Myanmar, as a quote from Aung San Suu Kyi. There's a reform commitment, a policy for people-centered development, strategy for a bottom-up approach, then establishment of a national planning commission to look at national planning, and democratization and delegation of power to the regions and states, so it's no more centralized, and comprehensive decentralization strategies in planning and development. So these are the reform commitments. And how will this happen? There are these reforms which, the political reform of course is big, the economic reform as well. But then along with that there's also the administrative, the change in institutions, and the way that public-private collaboration was happening during the military government is certainly, it was certainly not transparent, and a lot of issues had started coming up, especially with the the minerals and the stuff like that. So now there is a proposal to also restructure how these things will happen. So the new commitment to urban in Myanmar, it appeared in the National League for Democracy election manifesto, where there was a special chapter on urban development for the first time in Myanmar. And then you have earlier in the economic and social planning, you did not have any spatial planning, but then now spatial planning has been incorporated. And this whole translation of reforms into National Spatial Development Framework Plan, so there's this National Spatial Development Framework Plan with the cities actually, given different functions, and then the linkage is very well developed. And then there's been a host of new urban policies and programs. Some of them are, still going on. They are in a draft stage, but a lot of them are coming up, and most of these are supported by the Japanese actually and the Koreans. So with this overview, if we come to Yangon and its townships, we see that Yangon has been, this is the city. It's kind of girdled by rivers here, and there is been over the years a kind of sprawling growth of the city, and this is the concentrated part. But not that this is unplanned. Each of these are the suburban townships, and all of them have actually been planned at some stage or the other. And what is happening here is, this is the CBD, and this is the port area here, and further down, and then you see that the growth is happening towards the north, where also this is where the airport is located, and most of the growth is happening there. And there are also no barriers, because towards the west as well as the east and the south, there are these huge rivers which are tidal rivers, and they're just big. They have been barriers. So in terms of density and how the city looks, you have at the heart of this whole thing, you have this low density zone. But it's not with low density residential. It's this Shwedagong Pagoda, which is the center of religion of Myanmar and Buddhist people. Now, and there are gardens around it, so therefore this part. Now this area near the harbor and port and everything was the colonial capital, and it's one of the very well preserved areas still, and during military rule there was some kind of damage to these structures, but it's being restored again. Then you have across the river, this is a township of Donna, and you have something like this, yeah? And there is a ferry there, there's no road or bridge. And here very close, now this is the, central city, and this was actually a gridiron pattern which was set up by the British, and a lot of Indians actually who went to Myanmar at that time in the early part of the 20th century, they were the ones who were staying here, but then now, originally the houses were something like this, but then this is what is happening. This is an extremely dense area, the densest in Yangon. And then these are the development townships. They were the suburbs, and these have always been the places where new housing was constructed. Earlier it was plotted, and now this is affordable rental housing being built for government, and a lot of other, and that's also where these public-private partnership projects are happening, and industries and everything is coming up there. So a city with a lot of varied kind of enclaves. Now this is basically to show that you have Yangon, which is divided into 33 townships, and there are 600 odd wards in these townships. So I guess each township is like a zone, if we in planning terms. And what is remarkable here is that there is a tremendous amount of variation in area. The smallest being 0.73 square kilometers to the largest, which is this. Then the variation in population, there's one township which is 3,000 and to 7 lakhs. Yeah? But these are the extreme ends. So most of them are between 20,000 to something like 60,000. Yeah. But here, what is important here to remember is that in terms of administration, every township gets the same, administrative structure. You have one person from every department there. If it's a township, then it's just like the UN with all these countries. Whether it's these tiny little countries, they have a vote in the UN. So similarly here as well. So here, so this is the area of Yangon City Development Committee, which is like a municipality. It used to be the Municipal Corporation of Yangon, but it is called the City Development Committee. And again, since 2013, they have some of the members. There are 9 of them, 4 of them are elected members, and 5 are appointed members. And it functions more or less like local government with all the departments and everything. And these ones with the arrows are the ones where we did the action planning exercises, which we'll talk about later. Now, Yangon has a structure plan. Yeah? By the 2 by the regional government and 3 by the national government, and the chairperson of Yangon Municipal of Yangon City Development Committee is a presidential nominee.
One of the 5.
Yes, he's one of the 5, and he's also a minister in the regional government. He's the Minister for Development. He's the mayor. He's the mayor, and even the chief minister of Yangon is appointed by the president. So these are executive posts. Yeah. So these are executive posts, and then there are some elected posts which are also there. So the vision for Yangon 2040, peaceful and beloved Yangon, a city of green and gold. So it's basically the golden pagodas, and it also signifies prosperity, and the green is the environmental thing and all that. And around it, it wants to be an international hub city, to be a comfortable city, city of good governance and well-managed infrastructure city. Now, JICA was there in Yangon for 5 years, helping this YCDC to prepare this structure plan, do all the studies and everything. And then also the European Union was kind of hand-holding and developing capacity of the team, the planning team that's in YCDC. So this is a kind of the structure plan with the structure. What it basically means is that there are new towns which are planned, And if they're planned on this side of the river, then there's obviously got to be heavy investment in transport infrastructure, bridges and things like that. And then there is decentralization of the central business district from here into the townships here. And then there's a ring road that is proposed around like this, and several proposals. And there is already a circular railway here which serves the townships. So what the Japanese are going to do is to develop that, and the stations are they will be given to private companies to develop commercial enterprises to kind of make the whole railway thing self-financing. So transport, CBD renovation, 3 new cities, 3 growth axes, decentralization, and a more compact city. Yeah. Now, the structure plan proposes that, it's part of the structure plan, that these various townships that we saw will come up with their own development plans within the structure plan. So if the structure plan says there's going to be a business district in a particular township, then they are supposed to develop that. Now this is in line with the decentralization proposal of the 2008 National Constitution, which also says that these kind of things should happen. So it's a little like our 74th constitutional amendment that the ingredients are there, but then there's no experience or capacity. Yeah. So it was here that IHS was approached by YCDC to help them prepare to train people in YCDC and the townships of preparing township development plans. And in 2016, we developed a methodology which was actually not fantastically original. It's an adaptation of the city development strategy methodology, but hugely simplified for Myanmar conditions, because we're also dealing with the people. For instance, there are in the general administration department in these townships, if there are 3 people, 2 might be lower division clerks and 1 might be an upper division clerk. Yeah, they're representing a department. So it's with these kind of people that you have to do planning. So it has to be simplified. You can, but it has to be simple enough for everybody to understand. So we piloted it in 3 of the townships, and also at the request of the national government developed a manual. We trained some people so that they could kind of roll out this thing into other townships. So the 3 pilot towns are Dalla, Insien, and Shepita. And if you see Dalla, now Dalla came up with, Dalla is a very, very poor township. Its great advantage is it's just across from the central business district, and there is a regular ferry service here. So it's really serves like a dormitory for the central CBD. But there is a huge bridge planned across the river. The Koreans are doing it, and there's going to be a new town in Dalla. So everything is going to change. Now I have this picture of all these township offices. So you see Dalla's township offices here. And the major problem that Dalla faces is that this is Yangon River. It's a tidal river, and all these paths get flooded, and through the canals, especially with all these climate change and things like that, all the freshwater bodies, these lakes which they depended on for water, are becoming saline. They have become, actually, except for 1. Yeah. So this water is a huge issue in and of course flooding. Yeah. So flooding is a major issue across all these townships because of this whole low-lying delta area. Then we have Inside, which is already a market town, and it has on the circle line, it has 7 railway stations which are in Inside Township. It also has a notorious insane jail where all the political prisoners are housed, and whether it's the Students' Revolt or members from NLD or wherever, they all go to insane jail. So, and it's growing. If you see 83, its population, and 2014, it's grown quite a lot. And it's very well endowed in terms of transport. You have the railway line, you have the circle rail, you have the highway, everything passing through. And it is, like you can see from the township office building, it used to be an old administrative center during colonial times as well. So it is an old township. Then you have Shwepitar, which is an industrial center, and particularly garment export, and lot of polluting chemicals happening over there, and there's a lot of pollution there, and waste generated in Shwepitar is just happening on the street, and it is also a center for higher education. You have a university located there, and you have several other institutes. And you see that here the township office is kind of in between Dala and Insane. Now this whole methodology for this township action planning, we look at it as a kind of a change management process, because it was not only a planning methodology, but then getting institutions which work in silos to work together and come up with something, people who've never talked to citizens before, actually sitting down with them, figuring out what they need and things like that. So it was a huge change. So, and of course, like earlier also I was saying, that there are quite a lot of opportunities now for this whole democratic process. Now, the political ideology of the National League for Democracy itself, they talk about democracy in practice through active participation of citizens' representatives in decision making, and active participation of citizens in electing these representatives. So these, they say, if the representatives are truly people's representatives, then the decisions they make will be people's decisions. Simple. Then the Constitution provides for delegation of power and responsibility to state and regional assemblies and the Lutol, and as well to the townships as well. So each of the ministries has these line departments, much the same that we have in the districts, and the so they also have the same structure which the British put in. You have the national government, you have the state, you have the districts, and then you have the cities, and you have the townships and the wards. Then the ward administrators have always been there. In the old times, when they were, the kings of Myanmar, they were the village heads, who, did a lot of troubleshooting in the village, but they were also informants to the military government. Now, that was continued, and these were always appointed, and they were, in a sense, reporting to the General Administration Department, which was like a civilian arm of the military. Yeah. So, with the same kind of approach in terms of law and order and things like that. So these ward administrators and also the village tract administrators, they were actually working for the military government to see that law and order is maintained, and also reporting back any kind of untoward incidents. They incidentally also were the ones who were allowing squatters to come and settle in these in their wards. Yeah, the squatters had to pay something there, to them to be able to stay over there. So each it was these ward administrators who knew exactly who's living in the ward. And there's also, below the ward administrators, there's a representative of 10 households. Now these are the representatives of the 10 households. They elect the ward administrator. Yeah? So that is how it works now. And a township administrator has been appointed in each of the townships. In the case of all other regions except Yangon region, this town administrator is from the General Administration Department. But in the case of Yangon, the town administrator is from YCDC, the Yangon City Development Committee, and because these are the highly urbanized townships which with a lot of municipal functions in them. Then also, as part of this national constitutional provisions of 2008, at township level you have, kind of committees which have been formed with people's representatives. There's a Township Development Support Committee, and there's a Township Municipal Affairs Committee. So each of them have 9 members, and with half of them, could be half. Anyway, so some of them who are nominated by who are government functionaries, and the others are elected. Now, what are the challenges? These are the opportunities that you already have these people in place, you have these structures. All departments work in silos, that's no surprise. Yeah. So education, health and all, they're all doing their little things. But and then they also sometimes have overlapping functions, which, especially for instance, housing. Yeah? The YCDC wants to do housing, plus the Ministry of Construction also wants to do housing, but they don't really coordinate with each other. Then General Administration Department, it's used to law and order function, but now it has got on its lap this whole participation thing also, which it's quite uncomfortable with. Then there's no role clarity of committees. Like if you talk to them, they say, I'm in a committee, but what committee, what is that committee supposed to do is very, very hazy. So one is kind of the support committee, which has no decision-making power, but kind of supports the township administration with people's views on things and their priorities and things like that. And the other is the municipal committee, which is supposed to monitor and oversee if municipal services are working or not. But there's a lot of haziness between this, and all committee members end up doing everything. But the crazy thing is that nobody listens to these committees. They're there. We had them in our participatory planning exercise also. They're very good people, had a lot of good things to say. And they were, the ones that we had, they were very accessible to people and everything like that. But the administration still has to take on this kind of role into it and assimilate it. Then this committees, again, there's an accountability issue, because you have both. You have the officials as well as the elected people there. So who's accountable to whom? Yeah. So it's this whole thing, and how do you do this thing is a big challenge. Then of course there's no capacity or experience to plan. There is a planning department, but it monitors what's the projects which are happening in the area, and it collects data which then goes into this general administration booklet on population and all these various things about the township. And it also feeds data for planning to the regional and central governments, but it does no planning in the township itself. And of course the continuation of the top-down regime, because the township officers they don't even know what's going planned for their town. Suddenly you find that there's an industrial estate coming up, which the township didn't know about at all. Neither did the YCDC know about it, but they have to do all the infrastructure and everything for the industrial estate. So it's that kind of thing which still continues. The other thing is, like I was mentioning earlier, that whatever the size of the township, you have the same structure and the same number of people who do the administration. Then again, this is the historical thing, the trust deficit between people and government, elected versus appointment. This is just an illustration of all these, departments which are represented in townships here. So you have all these which are there in some form or the other in the townships. Sorry?
Railways also.
Yeah, railways, because then there's the circular rail running and things like that. If of course there's no railway line there, then you don't have the railways. But you do have the railways there. Okay. Now these were the some of the participants of this course. Dada Township, Insane Township, CPR. But we also had the YCDC Planning Division and the Department of Urban and Housing Development of the Ministry of Construction, because these are the people who would come in as trainers then later on to do this kind of roll out this methodology in other places. Yeah, that was the idea. Now, it's a very simple process which happens in every action plan. Where are we now? Where do we want to go? What issues do we need to address? What steps must we take to get there? And how do we know if we are there? But yeah, it was a very, very simple methodology, and for them it was very new. Nobody had gone through that whole process. So that is the value of it. That through a very simple process you could manage to bring everybody together. But I must say that in the initial stages it was not easy at all, because people are not used to opening their mouths in front of other departments and people and things like that. But slowly when they started working together, looking at the problems, and also we had split up this whole course in 1 week each in 3 months. Basically, they didn't want long absence from work. That was one thing. Second thing is that they could go back and do their consultations and get data. That worked very well, because in this workshop method that we followed, you could have only a few people. You had 10 to 12 people from each of the townships. But then the outreach increased significantly, because then they would go back along with the YCDC person to then present what they've done, to get it endorsed and all that kind of thing. And we had to use a lot of team building techniques, including have t-shirts of different colors and things like that, because that was a very difficult thing to do. But suddenly when we had these t-shirts, and they had done their vision statement for each of the townships, and we had t-shirts with the vision written in Myanmar language and English at the back of the t-shirt, and suddenly they started working together. So I don't know what triggers this kind of team spirit is a very strange thing in these situations. Yeah? And then also we were wondering earlier, actually this was a diktat from the mayor, that we would have to work with all 3 townships together. We were just wondering how to manage it. But in the end it was okay, because they were working in their own township groups, but then also learning from each other. And we also went to another 4th township in Yangon to see what was happening there. So there was a lot of kind of validation. And then also the other thing was that in the townships, the the real experts, whether it is the drainage engineer or these people never really go there unless there's a problem. But here in the workshop, we got them from the YCDC main office, and so they could interact with them and sort out their problems, and also got allocations for their township through the process. Yeah, when he talks to this big boss there, and then he sees that there's a real problem. So he said, fine, in my next budget proposal, I'll put in your project. So that was a big thing there, kind of informal stuff that was going on. So here's the group work and presentations that were happening. This is the visit to the 4th township. Then here you can see the t-shirts. Yeah. This is Dala with its smart city vision here. This is the green t-shirts, and this is the somewhere the blue t-shirts of Insane. Yeah. So suddenly everything opened up with just by these people wearing t-shirts. Yeah. So the results, township action plan for 3 townships prepared, then trained resource persons in YCDC and DOHD, but I must say that they can't really go independently and do this thing. So then the next tranche of township action planning that we're going to do in Mandalay will have these resource people from there to do the sessions in Mandalay while we sit back. So that way then the capacity gets developed. And then you have the Township Action Plan manual. So how will it, I have another presentation which is the actual Township Action Plan for Shripitar. But before that, if you have any questions or comments, we can take it up.